My name is David. I live in Houston, Texas, where I have spent most of my adult life building a career as an independent contractor in the construction industry. I am not rich in the sense of owning private jets or estates scattered across the globe, but by most measures, I have done well for myself. My wife, Helen, and I have been married for 28 years. Together, we raised our daughter, Rachel, who married a young man named Mark about 2 years ago. Mark works as a financial advisor in a small but modern office complex on the edge of downtown. He has always struck me as sharp, ambitious, and respectful, the kind of man any father would hope for when entrusting his daughter's happiness. In the beginning, I welcomed him as my own son, teaching him small lessons about discipline and loyalty that life had taught me. That particular Friday afternoon started out like any other. I had just finished inspecting a new housing project on the north side of town and was driving back toward my own office when I realized I was only a few blocks from Mark's workplace. The thought came naturally, almost without effort, why not stop by and see how he was doing? Rachel had mentioned he had been working long hours, stressed about a new client account. A friendly visit could lift his spirits, I thought. The sun was dipping low, and traffic hummed lazily on the boulevard. As I turned into the driveway of Mark's office, my eyes caught a familiar vehicle parked near the gate. My wife's silver sedan. At first, I dismissed it as coincidence. Helen sometimes ran errands near downtown, and perhaps she had swung by to drop something off for Rachel. But my stomach twisted with unease. Why would Helen be at Mark's office at that hour? She had told me she was meeting friends for coffee on the other side of town. I parked a short distance away, leaving my truck angled behind a row of hedges. My footsteps on the pavement were soft, deliberate. Something in my gut urged me to move quietly, to approach without being seen. As I neared the low, tinted windows of the office, faint voices reached my ears. I leaned closer, straining to make out the words. My heart pounded with each syllable that slipped through the glass. "You know David will never find out," Mark's voice said. Helen laughed, a sound I knew intimately but had never heard in this context. Light, teasing, soaked in a familiarity that cut deep. "You underestimate him. He is sharper than you think. But as long as we are careful, there is no risk." My breath caught. For a moment, I thought I must have misheard. Perhaps they were discussing a business matter, something unrelated to me. But then, Helen's tone shifted, softer, almost sultry. "Do you regret it?" she asked. Mark's reply was immediate. "Not for a second. Being with you feels like everything I have been searching for. Rachel, she is wonderful, but she is young. With you, I feel understood." The air seemed to vanish from my lungs. The world tilted. My wife of nearly 3 decades, the mother of my only child, was speaking words of intimacy with my son-in-law. The betrayal crashed over me in waves, each one stronger than the last. I pressed my palm against the window frame, steadying myself. A surge of anger, grief, and disbelief battled within me. Part of me wanted to storm inside, to confront them both and demand answers. Another part, the colder and more calculating side, urged silence. Through the glass, I caught a glimpse of them. Helen sat across from Mark at his desk, her hand resting casually over his. The sight burned itself into my memory, a permanent scar etched in my mind. I stepped back, moving as quietly as I had arrived, retreating to the safety of my truck. My hands shook as I gripped the steering wheel, the engine's rumble barely masking the storm inside me. For several minutes, I sat frozen, staring at nothing. Images of my life with Helen played in fragments. Our wedding day under the summer sun, the birth of Rachel, late nights sharing quiet laughter after long workdays. All of it now poisoned, tainted by the knowledge that she had chosen to betray not only me but our daughter as well. The betrayal cut deeper because of who it was with. Mark. The man who had married my daughter, who had promised to cherish and protect her. The man I had trusted. I drove home on autopilot, my mind blank except for the echo of their voices. Every traffic light, every passing car blurred into insignificance. I only knew that the world I had believed in that morning was gone by the evening. At home, the silence of the house pressed down on me. Helen would not be back for hours, I knew. She would probably tell me she had spent the afternoon with her friends, smiling as if nothing had happened. I walked into my study, closed the door, and sat in the dark. The anger built inside me, growing hotter with each passing second. Confrontation would be too easy, too loud. They would deny it, twist the story, perhaps even turn Rachel against me. No, I told myself. I could not act rashly. I needed proof. I needed to understand the full scope of their betrayal before deciding what to do. That night, when Helen finally returned home, she greeted me with the same gentle smile she had worn for years. She kissed my cheek and asked about my day. I forced myself to smile back, to answer casually, though every muscle in my body screamed with rage. She moved around the kitchen, humming softly, unaware that I now saw her through different eyes. Every word she spoke felt rehearsed, every gesture a performance. I went to bed beside her, but sleep refused to come. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the steady rhythm of her breathing. My mind churned with plans, questions, and an aching sorrow that would not relent. How long had this been going on? Did Rachel suspect? How could I expose them without destroying her? The betrayal was a knife in my chest, but it was not enough to destroy me. No, I thought as I finally drifted into restless sleep. If they had chosen to play this game, then I would play too. And I would not lose. The decision settled in my heart like a stone. I would not confront them openly. I would gather evidence, build my strategy, and strike when the time was right. If they believed they could deceive me, then they had underestimated the man I truly was. This was no longer about pain alone. This was about justice, about reclaiming my dignity, and about teaching them both the price of betrayal. As I closed my eyes, one thought echoed louder than the rest. They will regret ever thinking they could make a fool of me. The morning after that dreadful discovery, I woke up with a weight pressing on my chest. Helen was still sleeping soundly beside me, her face serene, her breathing calm. To anyone else, she looked like a devoted wife resting after a long day. But to me, her image was nothing but a mask hiding the betrayal I now knew existed. I rose quietly, not wanting to disturb her. My movements were mechanical. Shower, coffee, toast. But my mind was already racing. What I had overheard in Mark's office could not be ignored, nor could it be trusted without proof. Words alone might be denied, twisted against me. If I confronted them now, they would simply weave lies. I had lived long enough to understand that people who betray are often skilled at deception. No, I thought to myself. I needed evidence. Something undeniable. Something that would expose them for what they were and leave them no room to escape. At my desk, I opened my laptop. The glow of the screen illuminated the dark corners of the room. I began searching for private investigators in Houston, sifting through websites and reviews. Most looked professional, promising discretion and results. After an hour of browsing, I settled on one, a man named Stephen Cole. He had a reputation for being thorough and discreet, with decades of experience handling cases of infidelity. I dialed his number. "Cole Investigations," came a calm, steady voice. "Mr. Cole, my name is David," I said, my tone low and controlled. "I need your help. It's personal. My wife and my son-in-law." There was a pause, as if he was giving me a moment to reconsider. Then, his voice returned. "You don't need to explain everything over the phone. Meet me at my office this afternoon, and we can talk. Can you be here at 3? "Yes," I replied without hesitation. The rest of the day crawled by. I busied myself with minor tasks at work, but my focus was non-existent. Every time my phone buzzed with a message from Helen, my blood boiled. She texted me casually, asking about dinner plans, unaware that her carefully hidden world was crumbling. At exactly 3, I pulled into a small office complex on the quieter side of town. The sign above the door read Cole Investigations in faded letters. Inside, the office was plain but orderly, with files stacked neatly on shelves and blinds drawn to keep out prying eyes. Stephen Cole was a man in his late 50s, his hair graying at the temples, his expression calm but sharp. He extended his hand firmly. "David, please have a seat." I sat across from him, the weight of my secret pressing harder now that I was about to speak it aloud. "My wife," I began, my voice tight. "Her name is Helen. We have been married nearly 3 decades. Yesterday, I discovered she is involved with my son-in-law, Mark. I overheard them myself. But I need proof. Solid proof that cannot be denied. Cole nodded, scribbling notes in a small pad. You want documentation. Photos, recordings, something tangible. Yes. I cannot go on suspicion alone. If I confront them, they will lie. I know it. But if I have proof, then I can decide how to act. Divorce, exposure, whatever comes next. But I need certainty. He leaned back, studying me carefully. This will not be easy. They will be cautious. Especially if they suspect you know. But people who think they are clever always make mistakes. If they are meeting, if they are careless even once, I will catch them. Are you ready for what that might mean? Once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. I already know the truth, I said flatly. Now I just need the world to see it too. Cole agreed to take the case. We discussed the details, where Helen usually went during the day, the car she drove, Mark's office hours, the places they might meet outside of work. I provided everything I could recall, every small pattern and habit. Cole listened carefully, asking pointed questions, his expression never changing. When I left his office, I felt a strange calm. The storm inside me was no less fierce, but I had taken the first step. I had turned my pain into a plan. That evening, Helen returned home on time, her demeanor as flawless as ever. She kissed my cheek, asked about my day, and set the table for dinner. I watched her every movement, memorizing the little details I had once found endearing, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she hummed while setting out silverware. But now those details sickened me. They were the actions of a woman who could lie to my face without hesitation. Rachel called during dinner. She sounded cheerful, talking about work, about how Mark had been busy but was doing well. I swallowed my anger as I listened, my heart breaking for her. She had no idea what kind of man she had married. After dinner, Helen suggested we watch a movie together. I agreed, though I had no intention of paying attention. As she leaned against me on the couch, pretending to be the devoted wife, my mind was already several steps ahead. Soon, I thought. Soon, her mask would crumble. The following days were torture. Every time Helen left the house, I wondered if she was meeting Mark. Every text she sent, every smile she gave me felt like another twist of the knife. I tried to keep my composure, not letting her see my suspicion, but inside I was unraveling. Cole called me on the third day. His voice was steady, professional, but I could sense the undercurrent of progress. I've been tracking her movements. She met with him yesterday afternoon. They didn't go into his office this time. They drove separately to a small motel outside town. I have photos. Clear ones. The words struck me like a hammer. Though I had expected this, hearing it confirmed shattered a part of me I had still been clinging to. Send them to me, I said, my voice hoarse. Within minutes, the photos arrived on my phone. There they were, Helen and Mark, stepping out of their cars, walking into the motel side by side. No mistaking it. No explaining it away. I stared at the images until my vision blurred. My hands trembled, my chest burned, and a deep, hollow ache consumed me. There it was. The truth in black and white. Cole called again later that evening. This is just the beginning. If you want more, video, conversations, repeated patterns, I can get them. But even with what you have now, it is undeniable. I thanked him, my voice flat. He had done his job. And now, I had what I needed. Helen came home that night as if nothing had happened. She kissed me, smiled, and asked if I had eaten. I forced myself to respond normally, though every word tasted like poison. She had no idea that her world was beginning to collapse. That night, as I lay in bed beside her, I made a vow. This would not be quick, and it would not be simple. They thought they could play with me, deceive me, and walk away unscathed. But I would show them both who I really was. I would not confront them in anger. I would destroy them with precision. The first stage was complete. I had my evidence. The next stage would be to plan my retaliation. And when I struck, it would be in such a way that neither Helen nor Mark could recover. I turned to look at her, asleep beside me, her face peaceful and unaware. The sight filled me with equal parts fury and determination. They had chosen betrayal. I would choose justice. And justice would not be kind. The days after receiving those photographs were the hardest I had ever endured. Grief, rage, and disbelief collided inside me in ways I had never thought possible. It felt as though every memory I had shared with Helen was poisoned, every smile she had given me nothing but a disguise for treachery. Yet beneath the pain, a new force took root: resolve. I knew I could not simply storm into their lives with accusations. That would give them the chance to twist the story, to claim I misunderstood, to try and pit Rachel against me. No. If I was going to act, it had to be with precision. I had to destroy their lies in a way they could not recover from. The first thing I did was lock away the photographs in a secure folder on my laptop, hidden behind layers of encryption. I printed one copy, sealed it in an envelope, and placed it in my office safe. I wanted no chance of Helen stumbling upon them by accident. She still smiled at me each morning as if nothing were wrong, and I needed her to believe I was blind. But I was no longer blind. I was wide awake. The next morning, I sat at my desk, sipping black coffee, and began to plan. Retaliation wasn't just about catching them red-handed, it was about strategy. I had to think like a builder, laying out a blueprint carefully before picking up the hammer. Helen had betrayed me, yes, but she was also my wife of 28 years. Our finances were tied together. Assets, property, retirement accounts, it was all interwoven. If I confronted her without preparation, she might attempt to drain our accounts or manipulate the law to her favor. Mark, as a financial advisor, would know exactly how to advise her to cripple me. That meant I had to protect myself first. I contacted an old friend of mine, Daniel, who happened to be a lawyer specializing in family law. I didn't reveal everything to him yet, only that I suspected infidelity and needed advice on how to safeguard my finances in case of divorce. He didn't ask many questions. First thing you need to do, David, is make sure your accounts are secure. Open a private account in your name only, move a portion of your liquid assets there. Don't drain your joint accounts yet, that'll raise suspicion, but protect a portion of your funds. I followed his advice to the letter. That afternoon, I opened a new account, transferred a discreet but significant amount, and began documenting every shared financial asset Helen and I had. It wasn't glamorous work, but it gave me a sense of control. The second step was Rachel. My daughter was innocent in all this, and yet she was bound to be the one most devastated when the truth came out. I could not tell her yet. The evidence had to be undeniable, and the timing had to be right. She deserved the truth, but not in fragments. Not in a way that would allow Mark to manipulate her with sweet words. And so I decided I would gather more proof. Enough to crush their lies completely. I called Stephen Cole again. I want everything, I told him. Photos, recordings, videos if possible. I want a record so complete that when the time comes, neither of them will be able to say a word in their defense. He didn't hesitate. Understood. It will take time, but I'll get you what you need. With that set in motion, I turned my focus inward. For the first time in years, I began journaling every detail of my day. Helen's movements, her excuses, her routines. I treated it like an investigation, because that's what it was. If she said she was meeting a friend, I noted the time she left, when she returned, what she was wearing. Every inconsistency became another brick in the wall I was building against her. Strangely, Helen seemed lighter these days. Happier. She laughed more easily, hummed more often. It sickened me to realize why. Of course she was happier. Her deceit was thriving. She thought she had found some secret source of excitement, a love she could indulge in while I remained the faithful fool at home. But what she saw as freedom was only a cage closing in. One evening, while we were having dinner together, I watched her carefully as she spoke about Rachel. "Mark's been working so hard," Helen said, her tone warm. "Rachel said he barely comes home before 10 most nights. She worries about him." I forced a nod. "He's young. Ambitious. That's how it goes sometimes." She smiled at me then, and for a brief second, I wondered if she could see through me. If she sensed that I knew. But she simply sipped her wine and changed the subject, oblivious to the war I was waging inside. 2 weeks later, Stephen Cole delivered again. This time, it wasn't just photos. It was video footage. He had followed them to the same hotel, filmed them entering together, and recorded snippets of them in the parking lot, holding hands, sharing brief kisses before parting ways. The evidence was undeniable. I watched the videos in the solitude of my study, my hands trembling. It was one thing to hear their voices through a wall, another to see them walking side by side like lovers in plain sight. Every second of footage was another nail in the coffin of my marriage. I didn't cry. I didn't shout. Instead, I sat perfectly still, my face like stone. The rage had burned so hot it had calcified into something harder. Something colder. And in that cold clarity, I began shaping my plan for revenge. The first target was Mark. He had not only betrayed Rachel but had also underestimated me. He thought I was just a middle-aged contractor, too simple to notice, too blind to fight back. But he had chosen the wrong man to deceive. I knew from Rachel that Mark's career was everything to him. His reputation, his clients, his carefully curated image as a reliable financial advisor, that was the foundation of his success. Destroying that foundation would be the perfect punishment. I began gathering information about his firm, his clients, his colleagues. Quietly, I reached out to an acquaintance in the business world who owed me a favor. Bit by bit, I learned how fragile Mark's professional standing truly was. One whisper of scandal could unravel everything he had built. Meanwhile, Helen remained blissfully unaware. She kissed me goodnight, made weekend plans, spoke of growing old together, all while secretly building her own fantasy life with Mark. But I was patient. Each lie she told me, each smile she gave me, only strengthened my resolve. The hardest part was pretending around Rachel. She often invited us for dinner, wanting us to spend time as a family. I accepted, of course. I sat at their table, watching Mark pour my daughter a glass of wine with the same hands that caressed my wife. I listened as Helen complimented Rachel's cooking, her eyes glancing toward Mark with a flicker so subtle only I noticed. Those evenings were torture, but they were also necessary. The more I endured, the more certain I became of what I needed to do. When the time came, the revelation would be devastating, but it would be final. Late one night, alone in my study, I opened my journal and wrote a single line across the page. They destroyed my trust. I will destroy their lives. It was not written in anger, but in determination. A statement of intent. I closed the journal and leaned back in my chair. The pieces were falling into place. The evidence was mine. The strategy was forming. All that remained was timing. And timing, I knew, was everything. When the strike came, it would not be loud or messy. It would be precise, calculated, and absolute. They would never see it coming. I had rehearsed this moment 100 times in my head, pacing out every sentence, every hand movement, every pause. The plan was not to humiliate them in public or to explode like a dam letting loose. It was a surgical strike, quiet, legal, and devastating in its thoroughness. Mark had built his life on the appearance of competence and trust. Once that appearance cracked, everything beneath it would collapse. First, I needed a target. Mark worked at a small wealth management firm downtown, a place where reputation mattered as much as returns. His clients were locally known families, some of them generous with referrals. One whispered accusation from the right person would trigger internal compliance checks. From there, auditors could trace funds, and if there were misappropriations, regulators would move in. I started where any methodical man starts: paperwork. I gathered the motel footage and photos Stephen Cole had provided. I printed the images, burned copies to a disk, and made a binder with a clean cover and no title. Inside I placed a chronology, with dates and times, copies of emails and bank notices that hinted at irregularities, and notes from conversations I'd overheard. Everything was factual, verifiable, and precise. No melodrama. No accusations without evidence. I wanted a professional document that could not be dismissed with emotion. Then I reached out to someone I had helped in the past. Tom Reynolds ran a small boutique law firm that specialized in securities and compliance. I had done a job for Tom years ago, paving a driveway for his mother, and he had always remembered favors. He agreed to meet with me on the condition of confidentiality. Tom's office smelled faintly of old leather and printer ink. He did not look surprised when I slid the binder across the desk. He opened it slowly, his eyes scanning the timeline, the photos, the chain of events. When he reached the motel images, his brow tightened. "This is incriminating," he said, not loudly, but with a tone that made the word heavy in the room. "You have proof of an affair, yes. But that alone won't damage a financial advisor professionally. We need to connect behavior to mismanagement or a breach of fiduciary duty. Do you have any reason to believe he misused client funds?" I handed him the notes Cole had dug up, the small things that seemed trivial on their own but, when pieced together, formed a pattern. Transfers to accounts with little explanation. Unexplained lease payments. A few contractor checks that never cleared. One client complaint filed and dismissed, but the dates lined up oddly with Mark's frequent absences. Tom leaned back, considering. "We proceed carefully," he said. "I can make anonymous inquiries to the firm's compliance department, and if they find anything suspicious, an audit follows. Alternatively, we can approach a major client discreetly. If a client asks for a formal review, the firm will have to respond, and that pulls the threads." He tapped the photos with a finger. "If Mark is embezzling or misallocating funds, these images of him with your wife create motive and opportunity. Not conclusive evidence, but a strong nudge in the right direction." We agreed on a two-pronged approach. Tom would contact a former client who still had influence in the community, someone likely to demand answers. At the same time, he would make a discreet tip to the regulatory authority that oversaw financial advisors in our state. I felt a knot of anticipation and dread in my stomach. This was no longer purely personal. It was legal, and once it started, it would be hard to control. The first ripple came from within Mark's firm. An internal audit was launched. I watched from a distance as Mark walked into work each morning, confident and immaculately dressed, unaware that the wall he thought protected him was like an eggshell. I sent no messages, made no calls. I let the professionals do their job. Then the calls began. They started as quiet, shuffling noises at first, a receptionist whispering to a partner, a conference of hushed voices behind frosted glass. But the next day, an email leaked to a local business news outlet. It was phrased delicately, the kind of professional reporting that doesn't scream scandal but notes the facts. An internal compliance review at a well-regarded advisory firm, sources say. Mark's face on the news mugshot that evening was like a mask melting. He called Rachel immediately, voice clipped and defensive. She texted me that he had a meeting and would be home late. I read the message with a cold satisfaction that surprised me. This was working. The machine I had set in motion was grinding, calculating, and relentless. A week later, the auditors requested detailed documentation for client accounts managed by Mark. The request was routine in a sense, but for Mark it was a storm. He scrambled to produce paperwork, explanations, and transaction logs. Some entries were sloppy. Others had chain of custody issues. The compliance officer asked uncomfortable questions, and the answers were evasive. Publicly, the firm issued a statement. They were cooperating with an internal review and had confidence in their processes. Privately, the atmosphere was poisonous. Mark's clients, once placid and trusting, began to ask for updates. One prominent client requested a formal transfer of accounts. Another asked to see audited statements. Quietly, motion by motion, Mark's network of trust unraveled. Helen noticed the change before Mark did. Her casual texts became frantic. She called me twice in one night, once from a hotel lobby and once from a gas station, her voice high and brittle with fear. "David, please, you don't understand," she pleaded at one point. "This is about Mark's work. He says it will be fine. The firm made a mistake with paperwork. They said they will clear it up." I listened, the old habit of protector rising within me for a moment despite everything. I asked no questions about what she felt, no accusations. Instead I stayed calm, neutral. Her panic only confirmed my belief that the pressure was mounting. As auditors dug deeper, they uncovered discrepancies that could not be explained away as clerical errors. Some transfers to accounts associated with Mark had no clear client authorization. A few invoices were coded in ways that suggested personal expense. For the first time, a firm partner convened an emergency meeting, and Mark was not invited until late. When he went into the conference room that day, the look on his face was a portrait of someone who realized for the first time that vanity had consequences. The partner presented a list of transactions flagged by the auditors. Mark spoke quickly, attempting to rationalize, to frame the entries as loans or temporary transfers, nothing nefarious and always in the client's best interest. But the correspondence was thin and unconvincing. At home, the veneer of normalcy cracked for Helen. She stopped humming in the kitchen. The laughter that had been a soundtrack to our evenings faded into silence. Rachel stopped inviting us over as often. When she did, the dinners were awkward and full of forced cheer. Mark grew pale and defensive. He called my phone once, his voice tight. "David, can we talk?" he said. "I know things look bad, but I can explain. It is not what it seems." There was something desperate in the plea, like a man attempting to bargain with fate. I agreed to meet him at a neutral place, a small diner where the booths were slightly sticky and the coffee was passable. I wanted to see the man who had betrayed me, to witness the explanations he would offer. He arrived in a pressed suit that no longer hid his unease. He sat down, ran a hand through his hair, and tried to smile. "Look, David," he began. "I never wanted to hurt Rachel. I care about her. And about Helen. This is complicated. I had some personal problems. I was using my own money. There were loan repayments, cash flow problems. I never touched client money. I would never do that." He was earnest in his denial, but the words held the thin paper quality of someone trying to cover a breach with tissue. I watched his lips move and thought of the motel footage, the late-night withdrawals, the leased office whose payments had mysteriously aligned with his absences. "Mark," I said quietly, "I am not a man who enjoys seeing families torn apart. But I am a man who respects the truth. If you have mismanaged funds, you need to come clean. If you have not, then the audit will prove it. Either way, this is bigger than the two of us." He leaned forward, voice dropping. "There are explanations. Talk to Rachel. Talk to my boss. Don't do anything rash." Rash. He used the word as if I were the danger. I let him talk, let him try to sway me. In the end, his tone shifted from pleading to thinly veiled threat. "You put my career at risk, David. If this goes public because of you, there will be consequences." It was the threat I expected. Bitter and small. But it also confirmed what I already knew. Mark was terrified because he had something to lose. A month into the audit, the firm suspended Mark pending further investigation. The regulatory authority opened an inquiry. Word spread quietly, then less quietly. One by one, clients moved their accounts. The firm released a terse statement saying they were committed to full transparency and would cooperate with investigators. Mark's image, once polished and unassailable, was now tarnished. He called Rachel in the middle of one night, voice shaking, begging her to believe him. She walked out in the rain, calling me from a payphone because her cell had died. I could hear the panic in her voice, the love fighting with confusion. I stayed calm on the other end, letting her vent. When she asked what to do, I told her the truth as much as she could handle, carefully and without accusation, and promised to be there for her. There were other victories, small and precise. Tom Reynolds had secured an interview with a financial journalist who wrote a piece about how internal audits often reveal systemic issues and how clients should perform due diligence. The article was measured, professional, and it hinted at the possibility of wrongdoing without naming names. But where the piece landed was enough to cause one major client to demand immediate transfers. That client pulled millions in assets in a single weekend. Panic, it turned out, was contagious in the world of money. At home, Helen was unraveling. She stopped attending social events, her eyes hollow in photographs. Once flamboyant and always polished, she began to dress in drab colors and look smaller in her clothes. She called less, texted more. Her language became terse, the practiced warmth replaced by anxious brevity. She came home one night with a hollow look and slumped into a chair. "They want him to resign," she said quietly. "They are talking about putting a report together. If this goes to the regulators, it will ruin him." Her voice cracked. For a moment, the woman I had loved looked like someone being dragged through a river of ice water. I sat across from her and said nothing for a long time. Revenge had never been about destroying for the sake of cruelty. It was about righting wrongs, about making choices have consequences. I looked at her and felt no triumph. Only a steady, solid sense that the truth had been served. By the time prosecutors and regulators started asking pointed questions, Mark's professional life was hanging by a thread. He called, left voicemails, tried to show remorse. Rachel stood at the precipice of disbelief and a dawning, heartbreaking clarity. The family I had loved in one form or another for decades was fracturing, and in the middle of the shards I stood with the evidence that had set everything into motion. There were nights when the guilt crept in, sharp and cold, insinuating itself into my chest. This was not how I had imagined protecting my life. But I had made choices with my eyes open. They had betrayed me and my daughter. I had sought truth, then guarded it and used it within the frame of the law. When the firm finally released a statement that Mark had been terminated due to policy violations pending regulatory review, I felt no joy. The end result was inevitable, but the cost was high for everyone involved. In the quiet hours, I wondered what would become of Rachel, of Helen, and of the small ordinary things we had once shared. The war had not ended, but the first major move had been made, and the board had checked the pieces. Now the only thing left was to see how they would fall. The morning after Mark's termination, I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching the sun crawl slowly across the neighborhood rooftops. The world was quiet except for the hum of distant traffic. For the first time in months, I felt a strange kind of peace. The storm I had unleashed was raging, but inside me there was calm. It wasn't satisfaction or gloating, it was something steadier, a reassurance that justice had begun to work itself out. Helen shuffled out of the bedroom late, her hair tangled, her eyes hollow. She barely looked at me as she poured herself a cup of coffee. There was no humming, no chatter, no small talk. Just silence, heavy as stone. I studied her face, searching for a trace of the woman I had loved for nearly 3 decades. But all I saw was fear, and beneath that, shame. She knew her secret life was collapsing. "I'm going out today," she said finally, her voice flat. "Where to?" I asked. "Just errands," she muttered. She didn't meet my eyes. She was lying, of course. Every word she spoke these days was a performance. But I didn't call her out. I let her live in her fiction because I already knew the ending. After she left, I called Rachel. I had been cautious about what I told her so far, feeding her pieces slowly, never enough to overwhelm her. She needed to discover the truth in increments, otherwise it would crush her. "Dad," she said, her voice tired, "I don't know what to do anymore. Mark barely talks to me. He's constantly on the phone, pacing around, cursing under his breath. I asked him if he was okay, and he just said it's work politics. But I saw his face. He's hiding something." I chose my words carefully. Sometimes the people closest to us are not who we think they are, Rachel. Sometimes they wear masks so convincing that even those who love them can't see beneath. But masks always slip eventually. There was silence for a moment on the line, then a small tremor in her voice. "Do you think he's cheating, Dad?" My heart clenched. I wanted to tell her everything, to lay the photographs and videos on the table and let the truth speak for itself. But she wasn't ready. Not yet. "Rachel," I said softly, "trust your instincts. You're smart. You know when something doesn't add up. Don't ignore that feeling." She sniffled quietly, then tried to sound strong. "If I find out he lied to me, I'll never forgive him." I didn't reply. She didn't need words from me. She needed space to let her own conclusions grow. Later that afternoon, Stephen Cole stopped by with an envelope. He had been continuing his surveillance at my request, and I suspected this delivery was worse than the last. He sat across from me at the kitchen table and slid the envelope forward. "You sure you want to see this, David?" he asked. "Yes," I said firmly. Inside were more photographs. Mark and Helen meeting in quiet corners of cafes, sitting too close together in his car, their faces locked in expressions that left nothing to interpretation. There was even a short video clip of them arguing outside a hotel, their voices raised. Cole had captured the sound, Helen demanding reassurance, Mark telling her to calm down, his tone sharp, irritated. I watched, my chest heavy, but I didn't flinch. This was confirmation of what I already knew. Their bond wasn't some fairy tale romance. It was messy, selfish, fragile. It was two people clutching at each other in desperation, willing to risk everything for stolen moments that would ultimately destroy them. "Thank you, Stephen," I said quietly. "What do you want me to do next?" he asked. Stay on them a little longer, I said. But be discreet. I think the end is close. When he left, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the evidence. My mind drifted back to when Helen and I were young. We had once been inseparable, two kids building a life from scratch, saving every dollar, supporting each other through struggles. I wondered when she had stopped seeing me as her partner. Was it gradual, like water eroding rock? Or had it been sudden, like a storm breaking the sky? I would never truly know. That evening, Helen came home late. She looked worn, her makeup smudged, her blouse wrinkled. I didn't ask where she had been. She didn't volunteer an explanation. We ate in silence, the clink of cutlery the only sound between us. After dinner, she sat across from me, her hands trembling slightly as she held her wineglass. "David," she said finally, if something were to happen between us, you'd want to know, right? I mean, you'd want me to tell you." My heart pounded, but I kept my face calm. "Honesty has always been important in a marriage," I said evenly. "Without it, there is no marriage." She stared at me, eyes glassy, lips pressed tight. For a moment, I thought she would confess. But then she looked away, swallowed hard, and said nothing. She finished her wine in one gulp and retreated to the bedroom. I exhaled slowly, realizing she was caught between her guilt and her fear. She wanted to unburden herself, but she didn't have the courage. That was fine. Soon, the truth would be dragged into the light, whether she spoke it or not. Over the next week, Mark's situation worsened. Rumors swirled that regulators had found enough irregularities to justify a formal investigation. A few news outlets began reporting on it, though carefully. His name wasn't front-page material yet, but it was spreading through the business community. Every whisper chipped away at his carefully constructed image. One evening, Rachel came to visit. She sat at the kitchen table, looking tired, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea. "Dad," she said softly, "I think Mark is lying to me. He told me he was at the office until midnight last night, but when I called, his coworker said he had left hours earlier. And when I asked him about it, he snapped at me, said I was being paranoid." I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. "Rachel, I need you to remember something. Lies don't multiply because of love. They multiply because of fear. And fear means the truth is dangerous. You deserve someone who isn't afraid of being honest with you." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back, nodding slowly. That night, after Rachel left, Helen confronted me. Her voice shook with anger. "What are you telling her, David? What poison are you putting in her head about Mark?" I looked at her evenly. "I'm not poisoning her. She's seeing the truth on her own. You can't shield her forever." Her face went pale, and for a moment I thought she might slap me. Instead, she turned on her heel and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her. I didn't follow. I didn't need to. Every step she took away from me was another step into the trap she and Mark had built for themselves. By the end of that month, the regulators had officially filed notice of investigation against Mark. The firm issued a public statement confirming his termination. His reputation was in tatters, his career all but destroyed. And then came the night I had been waiting for. Rachel called me, her voice shaking, tears streaming through the phone. "Dad," she sobbed, "I found messages on his phone. Between him and Mom." Her words hit me like a hammer, even though I had known it all along. Hearing her say it out loud, the connection finally made in her own mind, was like watching a dam break. "They've been lying to me this whole time," she cried. "Both of them. My own husband and my own mother." I clenched my fist, my jaw tight, my heart breaking for her. But I kept my voice steady. "I know, Rachel," I whispered. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to protect you from this. I wanted you to be ready when the truth came out." She wept harder, and I stayed on the line with her until her sobs softened into silence. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I realized the war was no longer just mine. Rachel was in it now, unwillingly drafted into the battlefield her mother and husband had created. And I knew I had a new responsibility, to guide her through the wreckage without letting it consume her. The revenge against Mark was nearly complete. His career was gone, his reputation destroyed. But Helen was still at my side, living in the same house, eating at the same table, pretending nothing had changed. That part of the battle had yet to be fought. And when it came, it would tear apart what little was left of our family. The tension in the house was unbearable. Every glance between Helen and me felt like a loaded weapon, silent but deadly. The air was thick with unspoken accusations, every corner of the living room shadowed with the weight of secrets. I had spent weeks planning the moment I would confront her, and now that it had arrived, I felt an unexpected hesitation. Confrontation was a storm I couldn't control once it started, and storms tend to leave a trail of destruction. It was late afternoon, and the sun was fading, painting the walls of the living room with streaks of orange and crimson. Helen was curled up on the sofa, scrolling on her phone, pretending to be absorbed. I stood in the doorway, observing her, my pulse quickening. Every small action she made, the flick of her hair, the tap of her finger, seemed rehearsed, like she was performing for an audience that didn't exist. "Helen," I said, my voice steady but low. She looked up, startled, then forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Yes, David." I took a step closer. "We need to talk." Her smile faltered. "About what?" "About everything," I said. She froze, and for a moment, I saw the raw fear in her eyes. The mask she had worn for so long cracked just slightly, and beneath it, I could see the panic she had tried so hard to hide. "Everything," she repeated, her voice trembling. "David, I cut her off gently but firmly. "Helen, I know about Mark. I know about the meetings, the calls, the lies. I know about the hotel. I know everything." Her body went rigid. The phone slipped from her hands and clattered to the floor. She tried to speak, but no words came out. I stepped closer, careful not to appear threatening, though my heart was pounding in my chest. "You've been living a lie," I continued. "Not just with me, but with Rachel. And do you have any idea what you've done to her?" She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. I didn't mean. I never wanted to hurt her." "Didn't mean to hurt her?" I repeated, disbelief and anger cutting through my calm. "Helen, you lied for months. You made choices that destroyed her trust, her sense of reality. And you pretended it was nothing." She broke down then, finally, her sobs loud and ragged. "David, please. I'm sorry. I never meant for it to go this far. I just. Just what?" I pressed. "Just what, Helen? Just needed attention? Just wanted to feel alive? You don't get to excuse this. You don't get to justify betrayal when the damage is already done." The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as she sat trembling on the sofa, unable to look at me. I could feel the years of resentment and hurt building inside me, ready to erupt. "I trusted you," I shouted. "I trusted you, Helen. We built this life together, and you threw it away for selfish games with my son-in-law." Her eyes widened at my words. I had hit her where it hurt most. Her hands trembled as she covered her face, trying to hide from me, from the truth she could no longer escape. She began, but I held up my hand. "No. Helen, don't speak. I don't want excuses. I don't want apologies that are meaningless. I want the truth. I want honesty. I want you to understand that what you've done cannot be undone, and that the consequences are only beginning." For a long moment, there was silence. Only her quiet sobs and my steady breathing filled the room. I could see the fear turning into realization. She knew that her world, the one she had carefully constructed, was crumbling, and there was no one to catch her fall. Finally, she looked up, her eyes red and swollen. "David, I'm scared. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to fix this." "You can't fix this," I said quietly. "You can't fix what you've broken. Rachel will see the truth, Mark will face the consequences, and you will have to live with yourself. That's the reality." Her lips quivered as she tried to speak again. I still love him. I don't know how to stop." I shook my head, my anger giving way to sorrow. "Love, Helen? Love doesn't lie. Love doesn't destroy the people you care about. What you feel isn't love, it's obsession, it's selfishness, and it's reckless. You've lost sight of what love really is." She covered her face with her hands again, and I felt a pang of something deep inside me. Pity, maybe, or grief for the woman I once knew. But there was no turning back. The confrontation had begun, and it had to go all the way. "I'm done pretending," I said, my voice firm. "I'm done living in a house where I don't know who the person across from me is. You need to leave, Helen. Not just for your sake, but for ours. Rachel needs clarity, and I need peace." Her sobs grew louder, more desperate. "Please, David. I can change. I can fix it. I'll end it with him, I swear. I can make this right." I felt a cold resolve settle over me. "Helen, this isn't about promises anymore. It's about accountability. You've already made your choices, and now you face the consequences. Leaving is the first step in facing them honestly. You can't stay here, pretending nothing happened, while our family slowly dies around you." The words hit her like a physical blow. She was trembling violently now, her body racked with sobs. I wanted to say more, to comfort her, to soften the blow, but there was no comfort in truth. Only action. "You will leave," I said firmly. "Tonight. Pack your things. Take whatever you need, but leave. And Helen, do not contact Rachel until she reaches out on her own terms. You've betrayed her too much already." She nodded weakly, tears streaming down her face. I understand. "I hope you do," I said. "Because nothing less than this is enough." Helen retreated to the bedroom, and I stayed in the living room, my hands gripping the edge of the coffee table. The weight of what was happening pressed on me like a physical force. I had spent weeks planning, observing, waiting for the right moment. Now that it had come, it was more exhausting and emotional than I had anticipated. Hours passed, and finally, Helen emerged with 2 suitcases. She moved silently, like a shadow, her face expressionless, her eyes fixed on the floor. She glanced at me briefly, and I saw in her eyes something I hadn't expected. Fear, yes, but also regret. The realization that she had lost more than just my trust hit her like a tidal wave. Without a word, she left, closing the door behind her. The house was silent again, but the silence was different this time. It wasn't oppressive or tense, it was weighted with finality. I sank into the sofa, my mind racing. Rachel's discovery of the messages, the confrontation with Helen, the destruction of Mark's career, it was all reaching its climax. I realized that the battle wasn't over, not yet. Rachel needed me now more than ever. She needed guidance, support, and someone to help her navigate the wreckage of a family torn apart. The phone rang, breaking the silence. It was Rachel. "Dad," she said, her voice shaking. I don't know what to do. I feel like everything I knew is gone." "I know, Rachel," I said softly. "I know. But you're stronger than you think. And I'll be here with you every step of the way. We'll face this together." Her sobs quieted slightly, and I could hear the faint tremor of hope in her voice. "Thank you, Dad. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You won't have to find out," I said. "We'll rebuild, Rachel. It won't be easy, but we'll survive this. And together, we'll make sure that the truth is never hidden again." That night, I lay awake, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside, thinking about everything that had happened. Helen was gone, Mark's life was unraveling, and Rachel was beginning to see the truth. The storm had reached its eye, and for the first time, I felt a small measure of control. But I knew this was only the beginning of the aftermath. Families don't just recover from betrayal in a week. Healing is slow, painful, and unpredictable. And I would be there, navigating every turn, protecting Rachel from the fallout, and ensuring that the people who had caused so much pain finally faced the consequences of their actions. Because some things, once broken, cannot be ignored. And some truths, once revealed, cannot be unseen. The days following Helen's departure were eerily quiet. The house felt different, hollow in a way I had never imagined possible. Every room seemed to carry the weight of the betrayal, the echoes of conversations that were never meant to be overheard, and the absence of someone who had once been central to our lives. I kept myself busy, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy for Rachel, but I could see the strain on her face every time she tried to smile. Rachel was staying in her room more than usual, scrolling through her phone, reading messages, and piecing together the reality she had been shielded from for so long. I didn't interfere unless she called me in, giving her the space she needed to process her feelings. But I could feel the storm brewing in her heart, the need to confront the people who had deceived her so completely. One morning, she knocked on my office door. "Dad, can we talk?" she asked, her voice small but determined. I gestured for her to sit. "Of course, Rachel. What's on your mind?" She hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I can't just ignore what Helen and Mark did. I need to confront him, and maybe even her. I need answers, Dad. I need to hear it from them." I studied her carefully. There was a fire in her eyes, a mixture of anger, confusion, and pain. I knew she was ready for this, and I also knew how dangerous it could be emotionally. But avoiding the confrontation would only prolong her suffering. "All right," I said finally. "But we do this carefully. You need to prepare yourself. Don't go in expecting apologies. Go in expecting the truth, no matter how harsh it is." She nodded, determination hardening her expression. "I can do that." Later that afternoon, we drove to Mark's office. The air was thick with tension, and I could sense Rachel's anxiety building with every passing mile. When we arrived, Mark's office looked just as polished and sterile as ever. The large glass windows reflected the city skyline, but to me, they seemed like a cage, a transparent barrier separating someone from the reality of their actions. I knocked lightly on the door before Rachel stepped forward. Mark looked up, surprised. His face registered shock, then quickly shifted to a mask of casual indifference. "Rachel," he said smoothly. "What a surprise." "And, David, I didn't expect to see you here." Rachel took a step forward, her voice steady despite the storm inside her. "Mark, we need to talk." "No." He gestured for us to sit, but I shook my head. "No. We're standing. You've done enough hiding behind appearances, Mark. It's time for honesty." Mark's expression hardened slightly, a flicker of irritation crossing his face. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, his tone defensive. Rachel's eyes narrowed. "Don't play dumb. I know about Helen. I know about the meetings, the messages, and the lies. I know everything." For a moment, the room was silent. Mark's composed facade cracked slightly, but he quickly tried to recover. "Rachel, I—" "Don't!" she shouted, cutting him off. "You don't get to speak. Not until you've explained yourself. You've betrayed our trust, our family, and you need to own that." I watched Rachel closely, pride swelling in my chest despite the circumstances. She was no longer a scared, uncertain girl. She was confronting the man who had hurt her with courage and clarity. Mark ran a hand through his hair, his usual confidence shaken. "Rachel, I didn't mean for it to happen. Helen and it was a mistake. I never wanted to hurt anyone." Rachel laughed bitterly, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. "A mistake? You call destroying my family, lying to me, and betraying my trust a mistake?" I don't know what to say," Mark stammered, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. "Then don't say anything," I said firmly. "Just listen. And maybe, finally, understand the consequences of your actions." Rachel stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "You have no idea what it feels like to find out that the people you trusted the most were lying to you. To know that every word, every moment you thought was real, was just part of their game. You ruined our lives. You ruined Helen, you ruined yourself, and you nearly destroyed me." Mark swallowed hard. "Rachel, Silence," she snapped. "Just listen." He flinched under her gaze, the weight of her words hitting him like a physical blow. He had never seen her like this. No hesitation, no fear, no attempt to sugarcoat anything. Just pure, raw anger and pain. Rachel turned to me, her voice softening slightly. "Dad, I need to know something. Did she really love him? Or was it just obsession?" I took a deep breath, trying to choose my words carefully. "Love doesn't lie, Rachel. What Helen felt for Mark was not love. It was attraction, obsession, and selfishness. Love is loyalty, trust, and honesty. She lost sight of that, and it cost all of us dearly." Rachel nodded, her jaw tight. "I needed to hear that. I needed to know the truth, even if it hurts." Mark finally spoke, his voice low, almost desperate. "Rachel, I never meant for this to happen. Helen, she and it just happened. I didn't plan it. I didn't know how to stop it once it started." Rachel's expression hardened. "You didn't know how to stop it? Or you didn't care enough to try?" Mark didn't answer. His silence was enough to confirm the worst. "You need to understand," I said, my voice calm but firm, "actions have consequences. You both lied. You both betrayed the people who trusted you the most. And now, you will face the consequences." Mark's face paled. "Consequences? What do you mean?" "Rachel and I are going to make sure that what you've done is never hidden," I said. "The truth will come out. And you will be accountable for every decision, every lie, every betrayal." Rachel stepped closer to Mark, her voice unwavering. "I want you to understand the pain you caused. I want you to see it, feel it, and never forget it. You made choices, Mark, and now you live with them. No excuses, no apologies, just truth." For a moment, he looked like a man trapped, realizing the magnitude of his actions for the first time. His carefully constructed life, his control over appearances, was crumbling. And Rachel, the person he had underestimated and betrayed, was standing in front of him, unyielding. The confrontation lasted for hours. Mark tried to justify himself, to explain, to negotiate forgiveness, but Rachel would hear none of it. Every argument he made, every excuse, was dismantled by the weight of truth and the clarity of her pain. I supported her, guiding the conversation, keeping the focus on honesty, ensuring that the confrontation remained a catalyst for truth rather than spiraling into chaos. By the time we left Mark's office, Rachel looked exhausted but liberated. She had faced the person who had caused so much pain, and for the first time, she seemed to reclaim control over her own life. On the drive home, she was quiet, staring out the window, lost in thought. I reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "You did the right thing, Rachel." Confronting him, hearing the truth, standing your ground, that takes courage. She nodded slowly, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "It feels like the first step in fixing everything. Like I can finally breathe again." "You can," I said. "And we'll keep moving forward, together. We'll rebuild what's been broken, and we'll make sure the people who betrayed us never have that power again." That night, Rachel went to bed earlier than usual. I stayed awake in my office, reflecting on the confrontation. Mark's world was cracking, Helen's absence was finally being felt, and Rachel was beginning to heal. But the journey was far from over. There were still lies to unravel, truths to face, and consequences. The days leading up to the final confrontation were tense. Rachel and I had spent every moment preparing ourselves, not physically, but mentally and emotionally, for what was coming. Helen's absence was still a sharp wound, but now it was time for closure. No more hiding. No more lies. No more pretending everything was fine. We had learned enough to know where she was. Her new apartment across the city, furnished minimally, a reflection of the life she had tried to escape into. It wasn't far from Mark's office, and I knew that facing her directly would force the truth out. Rachel needed this, and I owed it to her to be there for support. When we arrived, the building looked ordinary, almost unremarkable. The kind of place where no one would suspect a storm was brewing inside. Rachel took a deep breath and rang the buzzer. Helen's voice came through after a long pause, hesitant and wary. "Rachel." Helen's tone was soft, but there was an edge of fear in it. "It's me, Helen. Open the door." "We need to talk," Rachel said firmly. After another pause, the door clicked open. Helen looked smaller than I remembered, as if the weight of guilt had physically shrunk her. She hesitated at the doorway, studying Rachel's face, which was now hardened with determination. "I didn't know you'd come together," Helen whispered, almost to herself. Rachel stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Helen's. "I came because I need answers. And I want you to know, Helen, that what you did, what you and Mark did, is unforgivable." Helen flinched at the word, but she didn't interrupt. She was silent, waiting. "Why?" Rachel's voice cracked slightly, but the anger beneath it was undeniable. "Why betray us? Why betray me, Dad, and even yourself? You had everything, Helen. Why throw it all away?" Helen's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was steady. I don't know how it happened. Mark was different, exciting. I felt alive with him, in a way I hadn't with anyone else. And I thought I could control it, that it wouldn't affect anyone, but it did. It destroyed everything. And now, I see it. Rachel's anger didn't fade. See it. You see it now. After tearing my family apart, lying to everyone, making a mockery of trust. Helen looked down, ashamed. I was selfish. I was stupid. And I'm sorry. I can't take back what I did, Rachel, but I can try to make amends, even if it's just by telling the truth and accepting the consequences. Rachel's eyes softened slightly, but the steel in her voice remained. Making amends isn't just words, Helen. It's actions. You need to understand how deep the damage goes. And you need to leave our lives permanently. No more contact, no more lies, no more pretending. Helen nodded, tears streaming down her face. I understand. I'll leave. I promise. I'll make sure you never have to see me again, unless it's absolutely necessary for the truth to come out. I watched the exchange quietly. Rachel was taking control, but she also allowed a sliver of compassion, something that Helen clearly needed to acknowledge. It was painful, but it was the kind of closure that allowed healing to begin. After Helen left, Rachel and I sat in silence for a while. Neither of us needed words. The tension in the air was slowly dissipating. Finally, Rachel spoke. Dad, I think this is it. I think we can finally move on. I think you're right, I said. But there's still one thing. Mark. Rachel nodded, her resolve returning. He has to face what he's done too. He can't escape responsibility just because Helen is gone. We returned to Mark's office one last time. This time, there was no hesitation. We walked in with confidence, with the weight of truth behind us. Mark looked up, surprised, then apprehensive when he saw the determination on Rachel's face. Mark, I said firmly, this is it. No more lies, no more excuses. Rachel and I are here to make sure the truth is known, and that you face the consequences of your actions. Mark tried to speak, but Rachel cut him off. Don't. You don't get to justify yourself anymore. You need to listen and understand the pain you caused. He swallowed hard, the mask of composure he always wore finally breaking. I know I hurt everyone. I never meant to, but I did. I can't take it back. You can't take it back, Rachel said, her voice steady. But you can be honest, and you can take responsibility. You can make sure this never happens again, to anyone. That's all you can do now. Mark's shoulders slumped. For the first time, he looked genuinely remorseful, aware of the damage his choices had caused. I understand, he whispered. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right. Rachel's eyes softened slightly. You can start by leaving our lives and never repeating this behavior. You caused enough pain. Now it's time to let go. Mark nodded slowly. I will. I promise. As we left his office, Rachel exhaled deeply, relief washing over her. It's finally over, she said softly. I feel lighter. Like a weight has been lifted. I smiled at her. It is over, Rachel. And we can rebuild. Slowly, carefully, but we'll rebuild together. The drive home was quiet but not uncomfortable. For the first time in weeks, there was no tension, no anger, only a sense of hope and the possibility of healing. Rachel held my hand, and I felt the strength in her grip, a symbol of resilience and courage. When we reached home, Rachel went straight to her room to rest. I stayed in the living room, reflecting on everything that had happened. The betrayal, the lies, the pain, the confrontations, they were all behind us now. And yet, I knew that the lessons would remain, shaping how we lived our lives moving forward. Helen's absence, Mark's remorse, and Rachel's courage had taught me something vital. Trust is fragile, but it can be rebuilt with honesty and determination. Pain is inevitable in life, but resilience is a choice. And family, the people who stand by you even in the darkest times, are priceless. That night, I looked out the window at the city lights, feeling a sense of closure I had not felt in weeks. The storm had passed, and in its wake was a calm that felt like healing. Rachel would grow stronger from this, I knew it. And I would be there, every step of the way, to support her. Life would never be the same, but perhaps it could be better. More honest, more grounded, more real. And in the end, that was all any of us could ask for. Because sometimes the hardest battles bring the most profound growth. And sometimes, even after the deepest betrayal, hope can find its way back. If you enjoyed my story, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss another gripping story like this one. Share your thoughts in the comments and let us know what story you want next.